So if you haven't seen the unboxing of that Coleman 100-watt solar panel, then you should watch that first. So in this video, I'm going to show you how I connected the charge controller to the solar panel, so it'll be easier for me to use. This is the charge controller that I bought. I was showing you out there, and I was saying that look how tiny these wires are, right? So that's incredible. And well, they're the experts. So I found they had this cover, right? So I was hoping that when I remove the cover, there'd be some screws there, and then I could just pull these wires out. But I think that the manufacturers decided, no, we're just going to solder the wires right into the board. Beautiful, huh? This is such a pain. Okay, so now I got to really take it all apart and solder it in. But now they limit your size here on the back there. So you see it's limiting the size of the hole, or the size of the wire you can use through that hole size. And then they've gone and connected soldered the wires right in. So here's the wire that came with it. And they gave you marrettes. They didn't even separate the wire for you, like, really. But they tinned them nicely. So look at the thickness of that wire compared to the thickness they're using. You can just see how different that is. Okay, so before I go opening this up, and it's going to void the warranty, right? I'm going to give it a quick test. I've got some power supplies here, and I know that my solar panel is going to kick out 22 volts. So I'm going to put 22 volts into it, and I'll measure the output of 12 volts, or I could even use that LED thing. So let's give that a shot. Let's see if that works. Right here it says 12 volts out, and this says solar panel. So it's going to be coming in from the solar panel, coming out 12 volts. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to kick my power supply up to 22 volts. So there you go, 22 volts. So I'm going to put that on the input, and I'm going to measure the output. And that's odd, it's coming out as 21 volts. And it's probably because there's no load. Anyway, I don't have a 12 volt battery in here to load it up with. Okay, so I can assume that works. I can turn off my power supply. Here's a screwdriver I thought I'd never really use much, but I'm finding that I am using it more and more all the time. So it's got the sliders, right? So you can just slide it up and down and choose the one that you think will fit, and then just sits right in there. Nice snug fit. So I've got the right one. So I'm just going to undo this. There you go. So I've got those screws out, and I'm just going to pop the case off here. Okay, it just comes apart real easy, and you have the wires running through the holes. You can see on this side that they've soldered it in. What's really neat is they've left space so you can connect another solar panel to this, right? What the problem is that they fixed it so you can't do two 100s, because the 100s put out 6 amps and this will only handle 8.5, so you can only do one. But the last one that I bought could handle 2 solar panels, so I just hardwired the second one right in. I had one controller doing both. I'll show you that in a later video. So right here you can see that I don't think, like, those are the size of the holes that these are in. There's no way, if I take a look at this wire, there's just no way that this wire is going to fit through those holes. See that? And I don't want to enlarge them. And I know it's going to give me nothing but heartache when I go to bend them around this 90-degree corner. I don't know. They're the experts. So I'm going to just go with my instinct. My gut feel tells me to go ahead and just cut these wires off and use heat shrink tubing to do what I want to do. So it really sucks that we have to do it this way. Like, they should have, you know, put screw mounts here so that you can just shove the wire in and screw them down, and that would have been the end of it. But so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just put this back together, and then I'm going to heat shrink them, even though it goes against everything I believe in. I'd rather just hardwire it straight in with soldering iron, because even if I like cut these wires, I don't think they'll honor the warranty. I don't know. It depends on the store. It's the manufacturer. I just go straight back to the manufacturer anyway, right? It's kind of stupid to put this door here. I thought for sure when I took this off there'd be screws there, and you know, for connectors, but there was nothing. No screw type connectors at all. So I was thinking about how can I connect this wire. So I went and got this, and what I'm going to do with this is I'm going to cut it in half, and then these two will marry together. Be perfect. You don't have to guess and everything like that. It'll be perfect. And the other end of this, I'm just going to just solder it, heat shrink it right to the cable of the solar panel itself, and then I'll just store this with the solar panel. It'll be good. And for $2 I bought this, so this will be good for $2. Anyway, this is good. So now here I go. I'm going to do some mounting. So this is from the battery. All I'm going to do is just cut these off, put these alligator clips on, and then Bob's your uncle there. And it's really easy. There's your black wire, your red wire, and your red and black clamps, alligator clips. So, and they're rated 10 amps here, so I think that's more than enough. Okay, I'm going to just take these off of here. I'm not sure I want to keep them. These are pretty cheap, so I'll just cut those off. Now they're going in the garbage. So if we look in here, so there's our connector right there, same on both sides. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to strip back some of the wire, and then I'm going to solder it right in there. And then what I want to do is I want to make sure that you have that little plastic ship in there. I want to be able to extend it if I ever have a battery that I need to extend it on, right? So I'm just going to leave it the way it is. I can peel this back as much as I want. Now I'm going to strip back this wire. I have these really nice strippers here. So what I do is I just let's say I'll go right to there, and I'll just spin this around, get it all nice and tight. Okay, then I'm just going to solder this right on there like that. I'm surprised there's no hole there, because usually they have a hole that you can shove the whole wire through and then solder on this side, but this will work. This will work just fine. So now I have to get something with a lot of heat. You know, you can't go using just a normal, like a pencil soldering iron, right? You can't go using something like that. It'll never give enough heat. You know, this is going to act like a huge heat sink. It's just going to pull the heat right out of this, and so there's no heat reservoir here. Now this might work. It might work a little better. So you've got this huge reservoir of heat that can quickly fill this copper with that. So I'll try that. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this in a clamp, because I don't want to have to hold this. Okay, there we are. So I'll make sure you can still see this. Yeah, good. So we're going to just scuff this up a little bit. Okay, make sure it's all good. Have our wire here. Soldering iron's being heated. I want to clean this up. So I'm just going to clean that up. Nice and silver. And this is going to work good. So we're going to tin the wire, and we're going to tin the soldering iron, get it ready. And we're going to tin this up a little bit too. So you can see that's melting nicely. Yeah, I'm just going to tin this up. So I'm going to take some flux. Alright, I'm going to just put some flux on there. A little bit of flux, and then I'm going to take my solder and I'm going to create a bridge so the heat transfers. You can see it's done a beautiful job. Okay, now I'm going to do the same with the wire here. I'm going to get the wire and tin it up, and you can put it on anything, like you can use a pair of pliers, whatever, just to hold it. And again, I'm going to put some flux on the wire. And then I'm going to just tin this up a little bit. There we go. So we got some solder on the wire. Now I'm going to go back to placing the wire on the clip here. So I'm just going to heat this up until that solder that's in there becomes liquid. I don't like the way that worked. I don't like that it wiggled. So I'm going to add another piece of construction to my work here. And they're called helping hands. So with these helping hands, right, you can hold things with these, right? Like for example, I can use the helping hands for everything. Like I can hold this and the wire all at once. Or since that's in a clamp, I can use the helping hands to hold the wire in place. Like this. And so the wire is being held. And that frees up my hands to do some soldering. And then I can really do a good job with this. And there we go. Okay, and I know if I crimp these over, this thing going to go on nice. So there we are. She's ready to go. Okay, and we're going to do the same with the negative side. And I'm going to place this in my helping hands here. And these can be flipped upside down, backwards, and every which way you want. So I'm just going to... Now really the proper way to tin these is with the wire hanging down so that the solder doesn't wick up underneath the insulation here, and that's where the weak spot will happen, right? So I'm just going to get some flux on this too. Alright, and then I'm going to clean up my soldering iron again. And start soldering. There. So what you're doing is you're creating a solder bridge. So I'm creating a little ball of solder on there, and then it's going to bridge that so the heat transfers. If you don't get the bridge, you're never going to transfer the heat. And you're going to end up pushing. You're always going to want to push your soldering iron, and you don't want to do that. So just create the bridge by creating a ball of solder on there. then on, and away you go. Start soldering. Perfect. Now I can take this with my helping hands. I can place the wire right on where I want it. Perfect. Okay, and then what you want to do again is you're going to have to create a solder bridge right here. And then you want to paint the solder on the wire. And the reason I like the helping hands is because you don't want movement, right? When you're soldering, as it's cooling, you don't want any movement. And without movement, that means that you're getting no hairline cracks that you can't even see, like, and then they're going to give you problems later. So that's it. She's solid. Now I want to clean that up a little bit. So I have my brush. I'm going to just move my soldering iron away for now. Okay, so I have my brush, and then I've got some alcohol, and I've got some paper towel. Got some paper towel here. You can use Kleenex too. And this is more of an industrial paper towel. It's got lots of like string in it. Okay, so I'm just going to take this alcohol. I'm going to spray it in. And I'm going to give it a brush. And I'm going to try to clean best I can all that resin. And you can use like different tools if you have to get it done. So this is a really nice little tool. It's got a little scriber on the end. You can use that to break apart this flux. Okay, there you go. And I mean, you can go so far as using Q-tips to get in there and clean it all out. Right, so I just want to get the majority of it. I mean, this isn't for, like, I don't have a company and I'm doing this for people for money, so this is just me. Okay, and that's clean. Just slide this up there, nice and tight, and we'll do this one. We'll make sure it's all cleaned up. Okay, and we'll take our little awl here. We'll get this in there. Okay. And there we are. Okay, it's just cleaned up. And we're ready. So there we go. These are ready to connect to the battery. And you can see that they're coming right from the 12 volts here for the battery. Okay. And now we're going to do this side. So you see we have one big wire. I've used these before. They're really nice and handy. So the thing you got to think about ahead of time is if I go and cut right across here, right, like most people would do, they would just cut straight across here. And the problem with that is that when we go to put our heat shrink over this and try to make it nice looking, it's going to be this big bump because we're going to have the two together, like the two cuts together. So what we want to do is kind of offset the cuts like that, so that when we connect the two together and we put one big heat shrink over it, then it won't be as ugly and it'll be, you know, a better construction altogether. So I'm just gonna offset cut these. To what I think I need, right? It's never going to be perfect, but I'd have to do like a few of these to make it perfect. Okay, so I've offset cut them. Now, this is coming from the solar battery, right? The solar panel. They used to be called solar batteries a long time ago, right? And like I'm talking about 40 years ago. But anyway, so there we go. So this is coming from the solar panel. Now, this is the negative side. We want it to be on the negative side here. So as you can see, what's going to happen is I got it offset, so it's going to make a really nice looking connection. Also, this is from the source. So you don't want this end to be there, right? And the way you can look at this is just like a house plug, right? Since this is the live, we don't want the live prong sticking out, right? So here, I should give you an example with my soldering iron. This is not live, right? So we always want the live to be the female, right? Because if this was live, you could touch these and you get a shock or short them out and you get an explosion. So that's the way you want to do it, right? So, make sense? That's the way you can remember how to do it. Okay, so this is going to be live, and we don't want like this black wire exposed to anything. We want it to be like this, so that the live, because current in a battery goes from negative to positive, so we don't want that to happen, like no shorts or anything. So here we're going to use this end because it's covered. I'm going to connect it to this wire, but now you see this wire needs to be cut shorter so that I can use the white here. So I'm going to start with the white wire, and I have to cut these ends off because they're soldered, and the connection I want to do is not a pigtail. I want to use like a union, I believe it's called a Western Union. So I want to use that kind of a connector on, or connection on this. So I'm just going to cut these off, and I'm going to assume that some of the solder wicked up into the wire, so I don't cut it just even with the wire. I just want to take out some of the wire with it, get rid of that. Now, as you can see, this black is going to be a different size. So I'm going to start with the white, and I'm going to strip this back and strip this back. So on my strippers, I'm probably going to start with the longest. And you do want more than you normally would. So you want a nice big connection like this. Look at the size of this wire. Oh, this is going to be awful to deal with. Okay, and then we're going to do the same here. Lots of wire. I could even probably use more than that because it's such a big wire. Oh my god. Yeah, I'm going to use a lot more. Let's try and get this out like that. Okay, and twist this up so it's nice and tight. There we are. And then we're going to do the same with this side. I'm going to just get this a little longer. Okay, get those out of the picture. There we are. So we have a really nice long. What you got to do is consider the heat shrink. So in the end, this is going to end up, you know, like this. But this size of this wire is going to be a little bigger than that. So we want a good size heat shrink to cover this, and we're going to want, like, these are going to twist together. So we're going to want a nice size heat shrink, and then we're going to need a heat shrink to go over the whole damn thing. Okay, so this is why I do this first. I do this side first. Now we have a couple of kinds of heat shrink. I've got this here, a waterproof heat shrink, and then this is a dual wall adhesive. Now I don't think we can use this one because I think it's what we're going to need is longer than that. So The nice thing about this adhesive is there's like a hot glue in here, and it melts and squeezes around there. We might be able to use this for here. Yeah, here we go. We've got some nice long heat shrink here. So we have to get all this heat shrink ready ahead of time. And we got to kind of guess at how much we're going to need. So here I am, I'm going to be doing this one here, and then I'm going to try to do the next one so it's about there. So it's about that long, so we can guesstimate that it's going to be about that long that we need it. So I want it to overlap a little bit and overlap at the top a little bit. Okay, so then we've got that done. And we can just shove this right through here. Okay, and this heat shrink, you can test it, you don't have to just imagine how much it's going to shrink, but you can test it and see how much it's going to shrink. And then I want a heat shrink tubing that's going to go over this whole thing. Now, we don't want to go crazy and get something too small, because what's going to happen is when we make that connection, it's going to be too big for that heat shrink. So we're going to want something that we know is going to fit nicely. And the way you can do that is you can just take both wires, and because the connection is going to be a little wider than that, see, it's not going to be nice. I can guarantee you. So I'm going to go up a size, and there we go. So that should work nicely, and it looks like it's already the right length, so we're ready to go. So I'm going to take a couple of those out and get them ready. Okay, and we got our white, and this is the right black end, so we're ready to go. Okay, now the way this knot works, and I believe it was named after like the Western Union Company that used to use this all the time. So we're going to just take this and we're going to wrap it up. And the more wraps you can get, the better, but this is really, really heavy wire. Right? It's so heavy. Okay, so I've wrapped it a couple of times. Okay, and what you want to watch for are the little threads of wire that are going to end up wanting to stick up. So here we go. It's all nice and clean. I'm not too worried about this sticking up right now. I'm going to trim it. Right, because you'll find that sometimes these wires are going to be really sharp. So I'm going to end up trimming it anyway, but I'll try this. Just trim it now, and maybe I won't have to do so much later. No, that's nice. Okay, so I'm just going to slide this over this end. And the problem is as you start soldering this wire, it's going to get hot. And you don't want your heat shrink to start shrinking. And we're going to do it all again. Try to get this wrapped around here as tight as we can. And then this one wrapped around here as tight as we can. And there we go. Nice and tight. There. Now we're going to put the alligator clip here. Hopefully it'll act like a heat sink and stop the heat from going to the heat shrink. Alright. Now, I'm just going to add some flux to this. Get these tools out of the way. This is, I feel, by far one of the strongest connections that you can make as far as wiring goes. Okay, and again, I'm always cleaning. It's part of soldering. You gotta clean, clean, clean. Everything's gotta be clean. Okay, and the only thing is you eat up all your space really quickly when you're working on stuff. Okay, so I'm just gonna get some solder on there. That's creating the bridge, right? So I want to be able to take this solder and bridge the wire. Then what you do is you just keep adding to the bridge until you see that the wire can accept the solder, see? And if it doesn't, just add more to the bridge and add the solder to the wire And you need a good sized soldering iron for this. I could even have gone with one of those heavier duty ones. Again, I need more bridge here because it's not heating up enough. There we go. Okay, and what you want to do is you want to have this solder for inspectability. So you don't want big clumps on there. You want to be able to see the wire shapes, right? You want to be able to see, I need more wire solder to make a bridge. See, so it's not transferring heat, right? And I just want to get so that I can inspect it and it looks good. I can see all the wire through my solder. You don't want big clumps on there. And that's a pretty good job, right? Then I can use my alcohol to cool it, but I don't like cooling any joints really quickly. I just like to blow on it a little bit. Okay, and it looks really sharp. Looks good. So I'm just going to spray some alcohol on it. Give it a wipe. Okay, see all the flux that came off of there? And that's just going to help stop the corrosion. Alright, I want this thing to last for years and years and years. Then I can pull the heat shrink up over that. I used a little too much heat shrink here. And I'm alright with that. You know, I'd rather use too much than too little. So I'm trying to feel where the center of the joint is and in the heat shrink. So there it is, right there in the middle. Perfect. I'm going to get my heat shrink gun. Put that on high. Try to keep the heat away from that one. Notice how I keep it moving? Don't want to keep it in one spot because this will burn it. Okay, so I had camera trouble, so you missed out on how I made all of this, but I'm going to do something is I'm going to show you on the next end of this wire how to do a good job of heat shrinking like this and making your connection. So I didn't mean to turn into like a publicity thing, but we're going to do that right now. Okay, so we're going to do this end right here. Now this is going to be really weird because we're going from a massive wire diameter to a smaller wire diameter. It's just going to make it so awkward. But anyway, we're going to make it work. So you can see the negative here is going to go on the black wire. So I'm going to strip some of that down now. Strip it right back here. Now we're not going to get a lot of this big wire wrapping around the small wire. It's just the way it's going to work. Not going to happen. So I'll twist this up. Then we're going to take this black wire. And I was looking up on Google why you would want big thick wire like this. Now the reason is because of the long distance. So when you're dealing with long distance in wire, you need thicker wire to go the long distance so you get less line drop. I was right when I said that in the video. So we want less line drop. So here, I don't know why they went with all this tiny wire, but they are just on. So if I look at my gauge here, see that? That's 14 gauge wire. So this wire, it just happens to be within the range of the 8 amps. You know, they're not leaving any extra. But you know, what do you want? They're a corporation, right? So I just stripped this all wrong. So I'm going to cut this wire off and do it again because I don't want any nicks. Okay. So I'm just going to go up to the next gauge here and try that. Yeah, so want to be, we don't want any nicks in the wire, and we do need quite long. Okay, nice and long. Okay, and we're going to need a heat shrink that's going to be able to cover both. So last time we used this size heat shrink, right, and it shrunk down nicely, but we don't have this big fat wire to deal with now, so we could probably get away with a smaller heat shrink. Okay, and it's obviously it's a very long heat shrink, so I'm going to bring that down a little bit, like to here. I'm going to imagine that this wire is halfway wrapped around here, so we could easily bring it down to here. Alright, and I'm going to strip away some of this wire. Now, we also have to deal with the heat shrink that's going to go over the whole thing. Now, with the last end, okay, right here, I don't think this is tight enough around here. I don't think so. I'm not really worried about it because all the heat shrink we use in here has like a hot glue in it, and it totally seals the wire anyway. But even here, you know, water can get in that, and it's tight, so I'm not really worried about it. It's the inside heat shrinks that really have to do all the work of making sure it's all waterproof. Now this is the one I used last time, and it's not going to be long enough, I don't think. We might be able to make it work. And it's pretty hard to say, well, we'll see, because let's see, so that's going to be down. Yeah, we might be able to make this work. Yeah, I think so. So I'll bring this down here. Now the problem is that this is never going to shrink small enough to get around this. So what I want to do is I want to make sure I have another heat shrink. So this is the one we just said we would use for here. Alright, so I want to make sure that I have another heat shrink over this wire to try to make that seem bigger, so that this heat shrink will fit better over it. Now I'll see if I've got some thicker stuff. Not really, so I'm going to try to use some of this, see if this will fit. Let's get rid of this wire. And yeah, so what I can do is I can try to bump it up, right? So what I'll do is I'll just take a chunk of this off, and there's our leftover piece from before, and if it fits, all right, sweet. So we're going to take this, shove it over the wire, okay, and then later we're going to pull it up with the white, right? So when I shrink these, they'll be underneath that white wire, or the white heat shrink. Okay, so I'm just going to move the white heat shrink onto this wire there, so that'll be nice. Okay, so now I'm just going to make sure this is all wound up really nice and tight, and this one too, and that we have the heat shrink on here ready to go, because once we solder it's just too late. Okay, and this is where it gets kind of really hard to deal with these big wires. So I'm going to just wrap this around the smaller wire around the bigger wire, and you're never, I don't think, going to get this big wire to wrap around the small one. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to trim off the big wire here. Okay, there. So now when I solder it, it'll be a good connection. And I can use my helping hands, or I can use the vise. I don't know, I kind of like the helping hands. And I bought these at the store. It used to be called Radio Shack when I used to work there. But now it's called The Source. And it's totally different than when I used to work there, I'll tell you. I used to work there like 40 years ago. And it was such a nice place to work. Okay, so I'm just going to clean this up again. I'm going to get my solder. I've already, there we are, and I'm creating that bridge again. And I'm going to solder for inspectability. So I'm just painting the solder on the wire. Right? If the wire doesn't get hot enough, I add some more solder to the bridge. And there you go. So I'm just painting the solder on the wire. I want to make sure I get the end there so it doesn't fray out and go through the heat shrink. And then I'm going down here, soldering here too, make sure I get the end of this wire. Now, I've got a very nice job. It's totally inspectable. I can look at that and go, all right, that's a good connection. Right? We don't want globs of solder everywhere. And I'm just going to blow on it just to cool it down a little bit. Okay, and I'm going to spray some alcohol on it and get it cleaned up. Right, and maybe some on the rag here. A paper towel, and I'll clean that up. And I'm searching for any pieces of wire that are sticking up that could go punch their way through the heat shrink tubing, and there are none. So this is a really good connection. See how nice and clean that is? That's a really nice solder joint. Very nice. It's not going to come undone. Okay, I'm going to slide this up, and I'm going to feel for the halfway mark. So I'm trying to feel where the connector will come up underneath the heat shrink. Okay, that's about right, nice and centered right there. Really centered well. Now I'm just going to take the heat shrink gun, and because this is a special heat shrink, remember it's got glue inside, like hot glue. I've got to start at one side and work my way across. Okay, when I'm heat shrinking. Okay, so there you go. That's a nice job. You can see the wire through the heat shrink. That's what you want. And if you can see the glue starting to squirt out the ends of the heat shrink. So this glue really makes this watertight, really watertight. And that's what we want. So next I'm going to do is I want to try to create a connection like the other one that's nice and flat, no bumps. So this connection ends here. I could have the insulation trim there. So I'm trying to figure out how much I could do here. So I'm going to try to strip away that much. We found out that we can't use the whole wire, so I can even save on that. So I can bring this up here. And the reason I want to save on it is because that white heat shrink tubing, I want it to cover more. So I really don't need that much of this anymore because we really can't use it. So I'm going to just strip that away. Okay. And twist that up nice. Now you can see where I want to put the red wire here. So I'm going to try to trim the red wire up here, I guess, even because I can strip the red wire back to here and then start wrapping it around that bigger wire. Okay, so I'm going to do that now. So this one worked out a good size, so we can do the same size with this, same length. Okay, now I can shove this in here. I'm glad I always double check everything. Okay, and we can just unwrap and wrap this back up nice and tight. Okay, so now we got the red wire. We want to strip the red wire from here. Let's see if I can dig my nail into the wire. Right there. So I've left a mark. I'm going to just take that mark and I'm going to put it right there on the, right there where it belongs on the stripper. Now these strippers are really handy. They do a great job of stripping the wire perfectly. I love them. You can get them in a number of different sizes too, and the heads can be changed. So I have this one here for doing like house wiring and these big wires. And I have one for doing really tiny fine wires. Okay, so now I'm just going to take this, and I want to keep this as straight as I can. I've stripped off a little too much, doesn't matter, it's going under the heat shrink. Okay, so I just want to keep this nice and tight, straight down, and I'm just going to wrap this around several times. Okay, and there we go. So she's ready for soldering. Now again with the helping hands. Okay, and get some rosin on there. Flux. What the flux does, it cleans the wire and it helps the solder to flow. So that really works nice when you can help the solder to flow. And again, we always want to solder for inspectability and paint our solder on. So I'm going to create a bridge. So this is going to create the heat bridge between the soldering iron and the wire. And then I'm going to paint the solder onto the wire. Now if it stops painting, always add some more heat bridge. Okay, so there you go. And anybody can do this really. So then we're going to just paint the solder onto the wire. And you see the flux, how it just helps all the solder just flow. Okay, so I'm going to just put some more heat bridge on there. There. And then we want to make sure these don't become frayed ends. And there we are. Nice job. And I just want to grab that end of the wire, make sure it's all good. Okay, good. Great. So that wire's done. I'm just going to let it sit for a while because I don't want to move it. I don't want to create any hairline fractures. Give it a quick little blow, and then I'm going to just clean it up and make sure it's good to go. Okay, and I'm just going to spray it. So while I'm cleaning this, also the alcohol cools it, I'm just feeling for any frayed wires that might be there. Okay, there we are. Nice looking job, and we've got it all cleaned up. Okay, now we're going to take this heat shrink, bring it up. Okay, and I'm going to feel for the halfway mark. Let's see, yeah, right about there. That's good. I'm going to shrink this down, one side to the other. Okay, so we have the heat shrink done, and you can see the glue is coming out the end nicely. So now we're going to take this white one and bring it up. Oh, again, I don't want it. So I spray it with alcohol for two reasons. To cool it, and it acts like a lubricant. So I can bring this up and it'll just slide right on there nice. Okay, so what I'm doing is I'm looking in here because I want to add my two pieces. This side's going to close up nice and tight. This by no means is waterproof, right? That's why we use that waterproof insulation heat shrink inside. Now I'm going to bring this up. This one's tight. Okay, I'm going to bring it up here, even with those. Then I'm going to bring this one up and put it on top of it. Right on top. And we're going to hopefully get a little thicker heat shrink here. I'll put it even with the end. Yep, that's good. We're covering both ends. Great. So now I'm going to start at this end because I want them all to shrink together. Okay, so I've got 1, 2, 3 on this side. So again, when heat shrink's done right, you should be able to see the wire right through the heat shrink. And look at that. The glue is nicely melting here from the inside ones. It's going on the wire. So it's going to create a little better seal at this end. We're not looking for a seal, but it would be nice. Okay, so we're not looking for a seal, but it would be nice here. And again, it's really, really hot. So I'm just going to... A little bit of alcohol goes a long way. Now on the other, I don't know if it got cut off, so I get my alcohol at the drugstore. So I ask for 99.9% alcohol. You don't want to be using rubbing alcohol. So it's a good idea to keep some of this alcohol on hand. There you go. So this is ready now. So when I go outside and I go into my camper, I'm going to be connecting these to the battery at last. Well, actually, I'll be doing that first, right? I'm going to try to do it right away, but I'm going to connect these to the battery, and I'm going to let this just droop down, and I'll connect this after I've placed the solar panel out there. And these lights will come on. So, just to reiterate, this is power coming from the solar panel. And the black side is the female, right? So it's totally safe. And then when we connect these together, it's going to marry up nicely. And it's going to make my job so much easier. So while I was looking for connectors, and these two, by the way, were a ridiculous price, like $9 Canadian, I thought, you know what? On my other set of solar panels, I never take them apart. Like, I never take off the wire. I always leave it connected to the solar panel and I throw it inside the RV. So this one we're going to do the same way. So this is going to the solar panel, and I've got the solar panel in the room here with me, so I can solder this up, heat shrink it up. I'm a kind of like a do-it-yourself kind of guy, right? So I don't mind the little things like this, doing them myself. Even the big things, like my wife and I have changed the awning on our last start. Well, that was a big job, you know. So anyway, so I'm going to just strip this back. Alright. And what we want to do is create that offset again. So I'm going to just do the black one first. See, there's going to be the size of our connection. So we don't need our heat shrink tubing to be that long. So we can just eyeball it and say we want it to be about there. Now, it just makes it easier to work with if it's shorter. I could have left the whole thing there, but I can save this too for some other project. That's it. So I'm going to need 2 of those. And the reason I like to put one over top is because I want the wires to stay together. Like, I imagine I could use electrical tape, but you know what? Electrical tape starts to come undone and it gets sticky. It becomes a mess, especially in the hot sun. So I'm just going to push this stuff out of the way. And then I'm going to need a heat shrink tubing for the whole thing. Now, I've got some other heat shrink tubing here, talked about earlier. So this stuff does not have the glue inside it, right? So even though it's waterproof, it doesn't have the glue. This one here is see, dual wall adhesive. Okay, so let's take a look at how much I need. So this is going to be the connection. So really, I'm going to be down to here, and this included. So can I get away with this? It'll be pretty tight, but I might be able to get away with that. Is it big enough? Yeah, it's big enough. And you know what? If you had the heat shrink, and I don't like buying heat shrink in little strips like this. I like to buy it in long, like 18-inch lengths and stuff, because then you can work with it. This here, you kind of messed up, and you're stuck with the same size. So this would be too small. See, this is just it'd be pushing it, because it's just, I can feel it. It's just too small. So this one here would be good. And remember, these two heat shrinks are going to be like that, right? So we want to see if that's going to cover it. And it will. But, okay, so I just heat shrunk the other one and this one. And we started heat shrinking from one side to the other. And you can see the glue is squirting out the edges. So we have a really good seal. Really good. Now we're ready to bring up this larger heat shrink. Now remember, its job is just to keep these wires together because I don't want them flailing apart. And we're just going to shove that right there, right over the two wires. Now, if it has trouble going over, remember my trick with the alcohol? Just spray the wires with alcohol and it'll act like a lubricant. So you can just pull the wire right over top, no problem at all. Okay. And the idea of this, I didn't want to use my big long heat shrink. I just want to keep this together. So I'm just going to heat shrink that right there. And that's it. Okay, so we are all done. So we got this. This end's all ready to go. It's the part that goes to the solar panel. And that's not going to come apart. And the other end's got the connector on it. So this connector is going to go to this connector, and they're going to go to this box, which is going to go to the battery. So there we are. Our controller's hooked up, and you can't see it, but the yellow light is definitely on, and the green light's off. But I just have my alligator clips separated so I don't have any problems. That's why I wanted to put this connector here. So when we're hooking this up, the last thing I do is connect this together. So I want to have this connected to the battery first, then I'll connect this together, and then there won't be any problems. So I brought a battery, and this is not the kind of battery you should be using, but we'll see if it does work on that. I'm just going to connect it up real quick like, and then I want to measure the voltage. So there's your negative and your positive going on right now. There we are. And it's not indicating charged, but the charging light looks like it's off. Okay, so I'm just going to take a quick measurement of the voltage here, and it's 20. Okay, so the output of this is supposed to be, it says cut out at 14.2 and cut in at 13 volts. Well, we'll leave it on there for a while and see what happens. It's an old garbage battery anyway. Anyway, so I hope you found this this interesting. If you did, give me a like, and please subscribe, because I'm going to keep doing projects on my RV, and I'm going to keep doing projects around the house, and but mostly the RV. You're going to see a lot of projects done, and I'm going to go over some of the projects I've already done so you can do them yourself. But this is what I'm doing here right now, is getting this hooked up and ready for the summer when we start using the RV and start going camping, and hoping that this will work. So the sun's going down right now. It's not hitting this as strongly as it should, and I'm not getting the charge on this that I would have liked. So I'm really shocked that it's 20 volts on the output. Oh, it's gone down. Incredible. It's gone down to 3 volts. Okay, so it's at 2.8 volts. Well, I'm glad I left it on there. So maybe this thing's figuring it all out and it's bringing the voltage up slowly. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there. So in the end, I connected the charge controller via the alligator clips to the battery on my generator. So I have a generator in case the power goes out at the house. And it seemed to do fine on that. I left it out in the sun and even left it out in the snowstorm, and it was good. So hope you enjoyed this video. Give me a thumbs up and subscribe if you like this stuff. So I just checked it out online just to make sure, and the solar panel itself on a really good day, it will put out 5.8 amps. And the charge controller says it'll handle a maximum of 8.5 amps. Now, there's a spot on the charge controller where I can connect the second panel to it. I don't know if that 8.5 amps means going into it, or that's the most it's going to allow into the battery. So maybe in a future video I'll buy another one of these panels, connect it up, and see what happens. But first I'll contact people and see what they're really meaning by that. Because if it can handle 2 panels and only put out 8.5 amps, I could live with that. I don't need the full 10 amps. But anyway, we'll see. Maybe we'll see in a future video connecting up a second 100-watt solar panel to this. Bye for now.